each of the countries is at a different stage in their evolution on their own journey into open banking. The starting point for each of these is they have to establish that the data belongs to the customer. Without that, you can't really develop open banking. So once they've established that, which is a legal requirement that the customer can share their data when they wish, the second stage is that the customer has to explicitly choose to give the data. And the third stage is to create a liability model that looks after the customer's interests. And you see, this is super important because applications are only as smart as the data you put into them. And what a customer really wants to be able to do is to aggregate all of their financial information. You just have to move on to the next stage, which is create a legal and regulatory framework that supports those three things. And then, and only then, should you move to developing technical standards. In the UK, who've been early entrants in this market, we had to go back and revise some of our technical thinking, which we started too early in the process, once we knew what liability model it had to properly support. So currently in the UK there are 9 banks, the 9 largest banks are live with API, which is the technical method of exchanging the data. Across the European Union, there's the Payment Services Directive, PSD2, which requires the banks to share the data if the customer asks for it. What we discovered in the UK during the attempt to go live with these APIs was that each of the banks had a subtle difference, some more than subtle difference, in how they had developed to the specification. And it wasn't until we introduced conformance testing tools and we pushed the API through it again and again and again did we get to a position where the connection between the fintech and the bank was much smoother. The thing which we're promoting is what we describe as open standards. And open standards allow vendors to compete, but not any of them to say we've got a unique piece of kit which everybody must use. So they're developed, and in the UK model we publish those standards with no intellectual property. So those standards can be used by any market if they wish to copy them for free. There's not a requirement for anybody to pay. The most important part of the standard though is what they describe as the security profile. The easiest way to describe the security profile is a electricity plug and socket. And in order for the fintech and the bank to connect, the socket must always be the same shape, and the plug that comes to attach to it must always be the same shape. So we're encouraging all markets to adopt the global open standard, which wasn't developed in the UK. It's an open standard called FAPI, the Financial API, and there's no reason for a new market that's exploring this to repeat all the mistakes that have been made in other markets. So take on the good bits and throw away the bits that didn't go so well, and you can accelerate your process. But it requires all parties to work together. It's not something that individual banks can just say we're going to be really great at this, because as soon as they start developing an entirely new suite with their own security profile, their own size of plug socket, it just gets really complicated, because then every fintech has an engineering overhead. We would encourage everybody to think about working together to develop standards.